Hello, I'm Rich Foster, Project Coordinator for Adverse Events at the ECOG-ACRIN Operations Office in Boston, and today I'm going to walk you through the process of creating and submitting a CTEP AERS ticket. We'll start with a brief overview of solicited and unsolicited adverse events in the RAVE system and running the expedited reporting evaluation, but the bulk of the presentation will be about creating a CTEP AERS ticket from scratch using the CTEP AERS website. Definitions for solicited and unsolicited adverse events appear in the form instructions section of the adverse event form in RAVE. Solicited or pre-specified adverse events are those events that must be assessed at each report period and are therefore pre-listed on this form. Solicited AEs are defaulted on this form and distinguished by a check mark in the column labeled solicited or derived. Solicited AEs that are evaluated must be reported as grades 0 to 5 every cycle. Persistent events must be reported in each cycle. For events that change grades during the cycle or report period, only the worst grade in this cycle or report period must be reported on this form. Unsolicited adverse events can be added by clicking the Add a New Log Line link located at the bottom of the page. New unsolicited adverse events of grades 1 to 5 must be reported. For persistent unsolicited AEs or events that extend continuously without resolution between the cycle and report periods, the event only needs to be reported if it is more severe in this cycle and reporting period. Integrated studies require the use of the expedited reporting evaluation to determine whether a CTEP AERS ticket must be submitted and to link to and initiate the ticket on the CTEP AERS website. The form is used to send AEs recorded in the adverse events form to rules evaluation to determine if expedited reporting is recommended. You would select the checkbox, send all AEs for validation, and save the form. Items denoted with an asterisk are required for rules evaluation. Note that the evaluation of adverse events will not occur if the adverse events form has one or more queries or missing items. Following the evaluation of the adverse events, if the recommended action report derived is none, but the investigator chooses to report the adverse event in CTEP AERS, then you'd select the hyperlink, click this link to complete the safety report, to launch CTEP AERS and complete the safety report. In this scenario, do not change the recommended action for the report to create. You'd rather leave it as none. Following the evaluation of the adverse events, if the recommended action for report is create, but the investigator chooses not to report the adverse event in CTEP AERS, then you would change the recommended action for the report to none. When the evaluation of the adverse events is complete, a unique report ID will be displayed on the form. The report ID is not the same as the ticket number in CTEP AERS. Instead, the report ID acts as the link between RAVE and CTEP AERS and can be used instead of the ticket number when managing reports in CTEP AERS. Choosing click this link to complete the safety report will take you to the CTEP AERS website to complete the ticket. Note, every time the adverse event form is amended, the expedited reporting evaluation must be run again, and in many cases, a previously submitted CTEP AERS ticket will have to be amended, again by clicking on the link. Just a quick note to let you know that it is always possible to override the recommended action, and you can do that by changing the recommended action by editing it from none to create. At the CTEP AERS website, most of the necessary information will be imported directly from RAVE. However, some sections of the ticket will still require data here, and you will have the opportunity to edit most sections of the ticket. Here, we're skipping to the end of the process since we've already seen the other sections of the ticket creation process. This submission will be a 10-day report, which is a standard CTEP AERS ticket. It's important to note that as of August 30th, 2024, all CTEP AERS submissions will begin with a 24-hour notification. This doesn't fundamentally change the procedures outlined in this training. However, it does add an extra step in the final submission process. The CRA will have to click the report button as shown here and then return to this page to click report again in order to submit the completed CTEP AERS ticket. There's a 5-day window allowed between the submission of the 24-hour notification and the submission of the completed ticket in case edits are needed. But the completed ticket can be submitted immediately after the 24-hour notification if you're confident that edits won't be needed. And of course, updates are allowed to the amendment process after the completed ticket is submitted. Now it's time to walk through the process of creating and submitting a CTEP AERS ticket from scratch. When you're logged into the CTEP AERS website, you would click on Manage Reports, and then to initiate a new report, you would click Report Adverse Events. And there's 2 sections here where you can do that, in the top left and in the middle on the right side of the page. You can click on either one of those to begin the process. Once you've clicked on Report Adverse Events, you would then enter at least 3 digits of the protocol number and then select the list from the list that comes in the drop-down menu. Then you'd enter the subject ID, then you'd re-enter the subject ID to confirm it, and then you would type at least 3 characters of the organization name. The drop-down menu will provide a list of organizations, and you can select the correct one from that. Then you would click Add to open the course cycle intervention page. Now you'll click the treatment assignment code or TAC on which the adverse event occurred. So if the patient was on Arm A, you would select Arm A. If the correct treatment assignment code is not available, you would click Other, and then enter the treatment information in the description field and click Save, the green button on the bottom right of the page. Now the completed page displays, and you can look it over to confirm that it's correct, and then click Continue. Here you'll enter the verbatim, which is the exact name of the event that occurred, and if no verbatim term exists or is not applicable, then enter the CTCAE term. So the terms, the verbatim does not have to match exactly the CTCAE term, but it should refer to the same event. It shouldn't be something totally different. Then you would click Add to expand the adverse events page. So you would type at least 3 characters of the CTCAE term and then select it from the list. Next, you would click to select the grade of the event. The grades listed will change depending on the CTCAE term selected. And number 3, you would enter the start date of the event. Then you'd enter the end date if there is one at this time. It's not required. A lot of times you're submitting the CTEP AERS ticket while the event is ongoing, so you can't enter an end date in that situation. Then you'd indicate whether the subject was hospitalized and select any other outcomes as appropriate. Then you would click Save and Report, which will take you to the next page. Now above that, you could click Add to enter all other adverse events at this time. So you can enter other verbatims and then enter the information for those. And there's also a link there to click to list all the CTCAE terms. This says 4.0. We're actually on CTCAE version 5.0 right now. So you'd click on that and it would show you all of the total current listing of CTCAE terms. That brings us to the review and report page, which displays either recommended or available actions based on the adverse event information entered and the rules created for the protocol, which include any applicable protocol-specific exceptions. In the adverse events section here, it indicates the primary adverse event and summarizes other information. Now here it's saying it's recommending to create, and you would click Report to start creating the ticket. Here, the available actions indicates that a report is not required. If no action is recommended, you can either exit the system or use the override option. And the override option is on the right-hand side of the screen, sort of near the middle. With the override option, the CTEP AERS report and 24-hour notification are options when override is selected, and you can click Restore Recommended Action to cancel the override. So you can always go back and if you decide that you don't want to override it. Here you would deselect the select checkbox if an adverse event is to be excluded from the report. This is not something that most sites do. Generally these days, if the site does not want to report an event, they simply won't include it in the adverse event ticket. We don't really use that very much, but I believe you're still able to if you want to. Here, the start date can be entered if omitted on the adverse event page, and the primary adverse event can be reselected when more than one event is being reported. Please note that the report is still not saved to the system. To continue with the report, you would click the report button on the bottom right-hand side of the page. This brings us to the reporter information section. First, you would enter all mandatory fields in the reporter details section. If the physician and reporter are two different people, then you would enter the mandatory fields in the treating physician details section. If the physician is the same as the reporter, you would click that particular checkbox in the middle of the page, and then you would click Save and Continue. Once the reporter page is completed and saved, the report's ticket number displays at the top of each page. Throughout the process, there's a navigation bar at the top of each page. And then blue check marks indicate that the section has been completed and saved. A highlighted tab indicates the section currently in use. Red asterisks indicate a mandatory section. And in most cases, the Save and Continue button is used to navigate from page to page. Now the Adverse Events page displays to review and revise entered information or to enter additional adverse events. You would click the plus sign to expand and review the entered adverse event, and then you would click Save and Continue. Now we're ready to describe the event. So you would enter all information related to the adverse event. This can be a narrative. Sometimes, there's a lot of text, a lot of information that you want to include, and you can. Sometimes it's pretty minimal, and that's okay as well. You'd select the subject status from a list of values. You'd enter the date the subject either recovered or died. If they haven't recovered yet and they haven't died, that would just be left blank. You'd indicate whether the subject was retreated after the event occurred. To enter the date the subject was removed from the study, if that's appropriate. And you would click this checkbox to indicate that an autopsy was performed. If the patient's alive, obviously an autopsy wasn't performed, and you would leave it blank. So anytime an autopsy is not performed, you just leave it blank. It's not a required field. Then you would click Save and Continue. On the course cycle page, you would enter the start date the subject received his or her first course of treatment. Then you'd enter the start date of the course associated with the adverse event. You'd enter the course number on which the adverse event occurred, and you'd enter the total number of courses the subject has received to date. Once you see that it's correct, you would click Save and Continue to move on to the next section. This brings us to study interventions or treatment agents. You'd select yes if the subject received an investigational agent. If not, you would select no. You'd click Add to expand the agents page. Then you'd select the agent from the list of values. You'd enter the total dose amount given during the course and the unit of measure. You'd enter the date the dose was last administered prior to the event, and you'd enter any delay in agent administration and indicate the time measure. Obviously, if there was no delay, you'd leave that section blank. You'd enter any relevant or appropriate comments. You would select any modification to the dose from the list of values if it's necessary, and then you would click Save and Continue. Subject details, you may revise the subject ID at this time. You must confirm the ID if it's changed. If it stays the same, it won't require that. You'd enter the subject's birth date. You'd select the subject's gender from the list. You would select the subject's ethnicity from the list. Select the subject's race from the list. And you may revise the organization at this time if needed. Now you would select the subject's baseline performance from the list. These are all drop-down menus, by the way. So the necessary information should be available in these drop-down menus. You'd enter the subject's height, including the unit of measure. Now, this would not be a drop-down menu for the height and weight, except for the unit of measure. That obviously you would enter the actual height and weight manually. And then you would scroll down to the disease information section. Now you'd select the name of the subject's disease from the list of values, and you would enter the other disease name if applicable. Then you type at least 3 characters and select the primary disease site from the list, and you would enter the date the subject was initially diagnosed with the disease if it's known. If it's not known, you would leave it blank. Now you'll scroll down to the metastatic disease site section. If necessary, you would click Add to expand the metastatic disease site page, and you would type at least 3 characters or click Show All to select the disease from the list. Now you'll scroll down to the pre-existing conditions section. If applicable, you would click Add to expand the pre-existing conditions page, and you'd select the condition from the list. Then you'll scroll down to the concomitant medications section. If applicable, you would click Add to expand the concomitant medications page. You'd enter the name of the medication the subject received, and you would scroll down to the prior therapy section. Now you'd click the Add to expand the prior therapies page. You would select the therapy from the list of values, enter additional information regarding the therapy, enter the start and end date of the prior therapy if known. Then you would click Add to expand the therapy agent section. Here you would select the agent from the list and then click Save and Continue. For other causes, if it's applicable, you would click Add a Cause to expand the Other Causes page. You'd enter any other cause that may have contributed to the adverse event, and then you would click Save and Continue. Now this section is important because every event that's reported on a CTEP AERS ticket must have an attribution of possible, probable, or definite to something. And if it's not related to any treatment agents or anything like that, you'd have to add something to this section in order to have in order to report the actual cause of the event. On the labs page, if it's necessary, you would click Add a Lab to expand the labs page, select the lab category from the list of values, select the name of the lab from the list of values, then you'd enter the lab values and the associated dates. Quick note, when the microbiology category is selected, you would enter the site, date, and infectious agents fields that display. This is certainly not for every study, it's only for some. Then you'd click Save and Continue. And this brings us to the attribution page. For each possible cause, you would select an attribution from the list. And this is where the other cause would show up if you had one reported. Here you have the disease itself is an option, and the study agent is an option, and below that would be the other cause that you had selected if you had one. And then you would click Save and Continue. We're at additional info. If necessary, you would click each checkbox to identify the information to be submitted with the report. And then you would click Save and Continue. This is the Review and Submit section, which has you review and provide the physician's sign-off. And you would click the plus sign to expand the section when it gives you this message that information is remaining to complete. In this case, there's information on the Describe Event section, so you would click Go Back to this page. This will take you back to that page, and you would add the required information. You would click Save, and then you would click the Review and Submit tab. That tells you that the Review and Submit section still has information remaining to complete, so you would click the plus sign to expand the section. And it says that the physician's sign-off is mandatory for this report. And this message indicates that the physician's sign-off must be completed. So you'd click Actions to generate the pre-submission report for the physician's review, and you would click Export AERS PDF, then follow the instructions to either open or save the file, and then the physician can review it. Once it's approved by the physician, you would click the physician sign-off checkbox, which certifies that the report has been reviewed and approved by the physician. And then you would click Submit. Before the final submission, you would complete the submitter section here. So you'd click one checkbox to indicate whether the submitter is the same person as the reporter or physician, and the details will automatically display. And then you would click Save and Continue. Here you can add additional recipients of the CTEP AERS report. So to specify the additional recipients, you'd enter the email addresses in the CC field here. You'd only use commas to separate the addresses, and then you would click Submit. After a 24-hour notification submission, CTEP AERS displays a link which will return you directly to the 5-day report. And the fax number is provided if additional information is to be faxed. Frequently asked questions link is also provided to aid the submission of additional information. You can click Export to generate a report file, but here this means submitted successfully on this date means that the report has been submitted properly, and now you're finished. The process for the CTEP AERS beta practice site is exactly the same, and here I'm just going to run through the login steps for that very quickly. Step 1, you go to the CTEP AERS login page, but do not log in. You would scroll down in the resources section on the bottom left side of the page. You would click on additional CTEP AERS resources. Step 3, you would scroll down and click on the link to CTEP AERS training/practice beta site. And then step 4, here's where you would log in with your username using id.me. And you can practice using patients on your own study or any other studies that you have access to. And that's the end of the process. Thank you very much.